Blog Talk Radio.
Boston Red here for BR on the World, our international presentation. Today, the day the lights went out. Wikipedia and 7,000 more sites on what is known as the web, an international platform for ideas and commerce. What they are protesting is a series of acts in the U.S., and we'll get to those now, and in the final part we'll have a wrap-up of today's news, including this event. But this will be the spotlight because of the importance that it has on the world. We'll start with the Wikipedia action, and we will then go into what it is all about. Wikipedia has blackened its site for 24 hours to protest new anti-piracy legislation in the U.S. Twitter declined to join the shutdown. This will always happen in these types of activities. What they are focusing on is two acts, one in the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Stop Online Piracy Act, Sopa, and the Protect Intellectual Property Act, Pipa. What the legislation would do is allow the Department of Justice and content owners to seek court orders requiring search engines to block results associated with piracy. Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, told the BBC opponents of Sopa have characterized the opposition as being people who want to embrace piracy. Proponents, of Sopa, are defend piracy. But that's not really the point. The point is the bill is so overboard and so badly written that it's going to impact all kinds of things that you don't know having anything to do with stopping piracy. The message replaces the normal Wikipedia front page on the web. For a decade, we've spent millions of hours building the largest encyclopedia in human history. Right now, the U.S. Congress is considering legislation that could fatally damage the free and open Internet. For 24 hours, to raise awareness, we are blackening our Wikipedia. The site is still available on mobile phones. Google.com also joined blackening its logo and linking to online petitions urging Congress to stop the censorship of the web. This is a very highly charged situation. The White House on Saturday issued a statement that's in the U.S. here. While we believe that online piracy by foreign websites is a serious problem that requires a serious legislative response, we will not support legislation that reduces freedom of expression, increases cyber security risks, and undermines a dynamic and innovative global Internet. Wikipedia said that the English site's administrator had decided to stage its first public protest because the bill would be devastating to the free and open web. Now, it would appear here that the president would veto this particular legislation. In addition, we don't think Sopa is going away. Pipa is still quite active. Moreover, Sopa and Pipa are just indications of a much broader problem. All around the world, we are seeing the development of legislation intended to fight online piracy, regulate the internet in other ways that hurt online freedom. Twitter gave the excuse for not joining this action, closing a global business in reaction to a single issued national politics is foolish. Well, in this particular case, Twitter is foolish. It's foolish because these kind of legislation will divide up the internet into various pieces, and the ultimate action will be that the U.S. will be isolated from the rest of the web, literally. When you consider that there are billions of people on the web, and most of them do not live in the continental U.S. or North America. This is what the issue is, literally. Now, the people behind this are people that are engaged primarily in old-line business models. The Hollywood movie industry and certain music publishing houses that are still stuck with the old ways. The movie industry in the U.S. has to appeal to consumers in other countries. Now, what could actually happen here is a backlash against the U.S. Movie industry could destroy Hollywood. Not only this, there are people out there that have the tools to disrupt the internet anywhere in the world, including in the U.S. So there would be all types of interruptions, and people would find other venues to go and other types of internet. The internet backbone is one of the things affected here, but at the same time, there could be alternatives. And this could be a headache for the U.S. Government. There could become, say, a backbone, a new backbone, more of an international one by satellites. Those kinds of things would start to affect not only the nature of the internet, but of this thing called capitalism itself. Because part of the problem here is that if people rebelled, there would be all kinds of problems involved in it. It's sort of like the tariff war against China and various other countries. It could shut out and make Chinese products more expensive in North America, but at the same time it could have consequences for North American businesses like Walmart that depend on that. They would have to go someplace else. So when you get into the global game, you are always causing problems here, and it's much more complicated than just very small items going on. So we have to look at this as a global situation, and this is the reason that the comments by Twitter are themselves not found to be very credible, and obviously missing the point that they are in a global business. A global business is global in nature, and by definition you need to incorporate various nations. Now, if they say, for instance, if they singled out China has 1 billion people and millions of people on the web. China could survive without the U.S. running an internal internet with other countries. So in other words, the U.S. could be literally shut out not only shut out of the internet within those countries, but at the same time, their movies could literally be shut out. So this could be a consequence of this type of action. It's not very well thought out at all. In search engines like Bing, Yahoo, etc., even Google could be held accountable for these sites. There are millions and millions of these sites. They change by the minute. So if you blocked them one day, they would appear someplace else. The internet is just literally too broad, and it's getting to be broader. This type of legislation would have worked 15 years ago, when primarily you had internet traffic in North America, about 60 or 70%, more like 60% penetration. And then you had internet traffic in Europe. But this is not that particular day. So in other words, you could shut off a few pirates coming out of Scandinavia or someplace like that, or coming out of the UK, or coming out of France or Italy. But today you're dealing with huge numbers of people that are not even on the net yet. You have the potential, you have 1 billion people in India, you have 1 billion people in China, you have the Russian Republic in that whole area, where you literally have hundreds of millions of people that are on now. And the U.S. dwarfs that with its 300 million plus population, and perhaps 200 million on the net or on mobile devices or whatever. So Lamar Smith, he's from Texas. You can expect that. He's chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He's pushing his particular part of this escapade. His bill is known as Sopa, Stop Online Piracy Act. It is designed to copyright infringement, in other words, stop it. Ad networks and processors such as PayPal would be prohibited from doing business with these sites. Now, you saw this happen in the case of the Julius Assange and his WikiLeaks. This is the new form. It's a boycott embargo that they decide they're not doing business with a certain entity or a certain country, as is what's happened with Iran. Now, if they can shut Iran down today, who will shut them down tomorrow? It's a dangerous situation. You have to look in terms of years. Now, back to the bill. The markup of Sopa was unfinished in December when the House broke for recess. Now there's a huge on-the-line movement against it. And it goes on here with Smith in his act. Smith said in a statement Tuesday, the bill will not harm Wikipedia, domestic blogs, or social or networking sites. This publicity stunt does not deserve, does a disservice to its users by promoting fear instead of fact. Perhaps during the blackout, internet users can look elsewhere for accurate definitions of online piracy. He's delusional. This fight on online piracy legislation is also raging in the Senate. Harry Reid, the leader of the Senate, has promised to bring the Senate version of Sopa to a vote next Tuesday. That's the Internet, the IP Act. What it is basically doing is it's pitting Hollywood against Silicon Valley. And the situation is the movie business is like a brick and mortar business. It is part of an old line business that is becoming more and more dated because of the way that content is delivered. Content now is being delivered more on the web. What they're talking about in terms of piracy is pretty much DVDs. As more and more content is delivered on the web, there will be tools, obviously, to offload this content. In other words, capture the content while it's streaming live on the web. Now, this would be much harder to stop because it would be distributed either freely or by cost, but these people would move around. The posting of DVDs and that sort of thing on the web now, or the selling of them, is utterly impossible to stop. Because once someone buys a DVD, that DVD itself, the encryption on it can be broken and mass-produced, literally. So the Motion Picture Association, that's one of the big supporters, echo this, attacking the protesters as stunts aimed at turning web users into corporate pawns. A so-called blackout is yet another gimmick, a vital dangerous one, designed to punish elected and administration officials who are working diligently to protect American jobs from foreign criminals. Now, this was issued by the chair of the Motion Picture Association, former Senator Dodd of Dodd-Frank fame. It is our hope the White House and Congress will call upon those intending to stage this boycott to stop the PR stunt and engage in meaningful efforts to combat piracy. Consumer groups and web companies warn the bill would stifle innovation and censor speech. That is correct, it would do that. And this is just the tip of the iceberg now, the formal protest by Wikipedia and the 7,000 others. A major concession to the bill's critics, Smith on Friday dropped a controversial provision that would have required Internet service providers to block infringing sites through a process known as domain name system filtering. They already do that. Patrick Leahy, the sponsor of the Senate bill, also said he's willing to re-examine the provision. Well, Leahy and the others are walking on very thin ice in this, and this is a winter across the U.S. with very little snow. The chairman of Google, Eric Smith, has compared the site blocking provision to how China censors political speech. A Senate Democratic aide expressed confidence that altering the provision would appease the bill's critics in the upper chamber. That may be, but it will not appease the critics on the World Wide Web, and there are millions of those. The Net Coalition, which represents major web companies, Google, Amazon, Yahoo, eBay, launched a radio and print advertisement campaign in 8 states on Wednesday to combat the legislation. Outspoken opponent, Senator Wyden, he's from Oregon, of the Protect IP people, will challenge the bill as a clear threat to innovation and economic growth. Over the past several days, the leading proponents of both have accepted that these proposals contain substantial flaws that require consideration of some of their central elements, Wyden said. For the Senate to consider Pipa next week would be premature and even beyond. Wyden has steadily opposed Protect IP and its predecessor combining online infringement and counterfeit act for the past year and a half, and he's renewed his pledge to filibuster it. Hope he does. The Oversight Committee Chair, Issa, this is the alarm king out of California, he's a Republican, also a critic of the legislation, said House Majority Leader Cantor had promised him the chamber would not vote on Sopa unless it has a consensus. Now, this is from the American standpoint. We've heard the international standpoint in an updated development here as we air out the time. The U.S. Secret Service investigating a suspected smoke bomb thrown over the fence of the White House during a mass occupation protest. No arrests were made. The projectile was thrown as 1,500 people. Is not a mass protest at all. Protested outside. The president and First Lady reported out with friends for Michelle Obama's 48th birthday. So they removed the projectile, which was evidently harmless, and so we go. This is Boston Red for BR on the World. Continue the struggle against Sopa and Pipa and any other attempts to censor the web. They are just simply counterproductive. Good day.
If you want to research something on the internet on Wednesday, don't rely on Wikipedia for help. The company has shut down its English language website for 24 hours, a protest against proposed American legislation.
We think it galvanizes the community and sends a message not only in this country but around the world that the internet is a open and free platform that needs to be protected and understood by policymakers everywhere.
The Stop Online Piracy Act, Sopa, and Protect Intellectual Property Act, Pipa, target foreign websites that contain illegally downloaded files. But there are also severe consequences for anyone associated with the so-called rogue sites. For example, the legislation could give the US government the power to shut down internet search engines which provide links to the sites, as well as companies which advertise on them or process their financial transactions. Internet giants Google, Twitter, Yahoo and eBay have written an open letter claiming the bills would stifle innovation and free speech. And it was a hot topic at an Occupy Wall Street rally in Washington, D.C.
It's going to allow them the potential to get rid of websites that they don't like. And right now, the internet is about the only free thing we have left.
It's an attack against our free speech rights under the United States Constitution.
Most of the people pushing for Sopa and Pipa are in the film and music industries. These days, anyone can illegally download movies, TV shows and tunes. Supporters of the legislation say the debate has been distorted and they've launched their own online campaigns. The bills have not yet gone to a vote in the US Congress, but appear to have support within both major parties. An added factor, the 2012 US election, with politicians desperate to hold on to power.
One of their strongest supporters for many, many years has been the Hollywood industry, the copyright industry in general, who have given them, millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions. So they want to make sure that those contributions are going to continue to flow this year.
At least 7,000 websites have joined Wikipedia for Wednesday's blackout, drawing worldwide attention and creating one of the biggest online revolts in the history of the internet. Kath Turner, Al Jazeera, New York.
In a tin roof house that leaks when it rains. And although she's only 24, like so many here, this single mother already has 3 mouths to feed.
I work at home as a hairdresser, which sometimes gives us enough to get by.
Buenos días. Her 32-year-old neighbor, Lalis, has 8 children and can barely move because of a recent accident.
I haven't worked since it happened, and my husband makes only the minimum wage. It's not enough with all the children we have.
But now help is on the way. President Hugo Chavez directs a lullaby at this pregnant woman's belly as he launches a new social program called Children of Venezuela, which gives 117 up to a maximum of 3 children to families living in extreme poverty. At another meeting, President Chavez again breaks out into song as he announces a generous pension increase for the elderly. All this with presidential elections just 10 months away. There's no question that these new programs will have an impact on the way people vote, especially in poor households like this one. Rightly or wrongly, many Venezuelans tell us that they're afraid that they will lose their benefits if President Chavez is not re-elected. The president, who faces his biggest electoral challenge in a decade, is trying to sound confident.
We're going to win the election on October the 7th. You can tell that to the world.
Still, if the recent landslide victory of his ally, President Cristina Kirchner of Argentina, is anything to go by, a significant boost in social spending, like this long-awaited housing project, or computers for public school children, can make the difference between winning and losing.
Japanese whalers and anti-whaling protesters have left 3 activists injured. The siege is taking its toll.
Things may be changing in Myanmar, but in Kachin State, the rebel army is still in war mode. In these pictures taken last month, a new batch of soldiers with the Kachin Independence Army is training to repel attacks by government soldiers. The KIA and its political wing have been fighting for autonomy. The war continues to take its toll on the state's civilian population. This is the coldest time in northern Myanmar. The tough conditions are made worse for the people who have been forced from their homes because of the fighting and are now in refugee camps. Among them is Lapai, who told us how he fled when government soldiers overran his village. He says they killed his wife while she was breastfeeding their 1-month-old baby. Their child survived.
I went back to look at my wife's body lying on the ground where we slept and found that she had been stabbed in the left rib 3 times and shot through her right wrist. Her body was lying down on the bed and the soldier stabbed her where she lay. I spoke to my wife's body. Don't worry about us. You've gone to a good place.
His story is not unique. There have been many allegations of abuse by government soldiers in ethnic minority areas where rebel armies have been fighting for more rights for their people.
The government talks about peace and how the country will change to democracy, but this is not happening in the ethnic areas like the Karen and the Kachin because there are still cases of human rights abuse like rape and forced labor.
The government and the rebels from Karen State have now agreed to a tentative ceasefire. But with reports of more Myanmar soldiers moving into areas of Kachin State controlled by the KIA, it may be some time before the mountains of the north are truly peaceful. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
Troops and tanks had entered the town on Friday. After 2 days of negotiations, the army says it'll withdraw from Zabadani, some 30 kilometers from Damascus, and in return, rebels are also expected to pull back. The Russian foreign minister has expressed the need for a political solution to the problems in Syria. He also said Russia doesn't support foreign military intervention.
The principle of the rule of law and strengthening democratic foundations must be respected not only within each and every state, but on the international arena. We are opposing any violence towards civilian population, but we also strongly oppose interference, military interference from the outside into domestic conflicts.
In Nigeria, the main suspect in the Christmas Day bomb attack, which killed 37 people, has escaped. Just the vehicle he was being transported in came under fire. The online encyclopedia website Wikipedia has shut down for 24 hours, along with many other sites. The blackout is in protest against proposed anti-piracy laws in the US. The laws are meant to tackle illegal copying of music and movies, but websites say it will force them to become online police. The rescue operation at the Costa Concordia cruise liner has now been suspended. It seems the ship, which capsized off the Italian coast, has shifted. Its captain is under house arrest. At least 29 people have been killed in Haiti after a truck lost control in Port-au-Prince. The vehicle's brakes failed, causing it to jump the curb onto the pavement. It happened on one of the capital's busiest streets. More than 60 other people have been injured. In South Sudan, a long-running conflict between 2 rival tribes is escalating. In a revenge attack, 47 people from the Naunua tribe were killed by the Merle tribe. It happened in a town in Jonglei State on Monday. Governments and aid agencies were too slow in their response to the drought in East Africa. That's according to a new report by Oxfam and Save the Children. It says early warning systems forecast an emergency situation a year before donors began a full-scale response. Those are the main stories. Coming up next, it's Inside Story.
This is Boston Red back for Boston Red on the World. Wikipedia is blacked out today, so is our site at World Press. We are blacked out in protest against the two draconian measures, Sopa and Pipa, in Greece. While we are here, they race to meet a deadline set up for them by outside people. This is with their creditors, private sector group represented by the Institute of International Finance. They're supposed to meet today. Cash-strapped, reading from Arizona, is in need of a deal to avoid going bankrupt. When, let's see, it's $18.5 billion of bonds redemption fell due in late March. Talks broke down on Friday over the interest rate that could be expected. Greece will offer new bonds in a plan to enforce creditors' losses. So there you go. Hardship on the workers in Papandreou said if Greece did not receive 100% participation in the program in which bondholders would voluntarily write down 130 billion of Greece's debt. They owe 450 billion. The country would consider passing a law to require the holders to take the loss. Well, this is going back and forth. Hedge funds holding Greek bonds that had matured in March may have the strongest hand. The government wants to swap out that maturing debt for newer debt, lower yielding bonds, and a smaller cash payment. With some of the big hedge funds in New York and London have snapped up chunks of March's maturing bonds for around 40 cents on the euro. In other words, they got them on the cheap. They're going to hold the deal up there, and in the end, the Greek people will pay for this. The EU, International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank officials are already combing through Greece's books to put together a rescue. The debt swap would see creditors voluntarily give up at least 50% of their promised returns. Without it, the EU and the IMF have warned they will consider that Greece's debt is not back on a substantial track and will not release further aid. There's definitely anger in the street. There's a general strike going on there right now. The transport and everything is closed. And so it goes. Now, has entered its fifth consecutive year of austerity-fueled recession, with unemployment reaching a record 17.7%. That was in the third quarter of 2011. The resentment of outsiders is evident. We want them to get lost. They are pushing the country towards collapse with these measures. They're selling off Greece. There's no doubt about that. Privatization programs are going on. This is what happens when a country gets in hot to the International Monetary Fund and various other levers. They tried the same thing to push Zimbabwe into the ground when it decided to redistribute farmland. It did not work. President Mugabe is still there. He went from the Zimbabwean money to a dollar. Things are really good. The opposition is now in government for what it's worth, and it's also been exposed for what it's worth. So in other words, they're going in a circular situation. Sort of just as what happened with the foreign minister of the Russian Republic, talking about Syria, a country that has been basically in a what one would term a civil war. But it's a little bit different in that you have opposition parties in Syria that have taken up arms, but at the same time you have interference from outside governments, particularly Israel and then Assad, and various other Western governments have sent trainers or trained people and weapons. So you literally have an open rebellion in parts of Syria. Now, there has been a ceasefire in one of the mountainous towns. The army will withdraw from there, and supposedly the armed combatants are supposed to do the same. Now, this is a very interesting struggle. It is different from the Libyan struggle in that Syria has a much stronger army and political fabric. But nonetheless, there are outside forces who want to bring the Assad government down, and for various reasons that they have staunchly endorsed. Various groups, including Hezbollah, the Palestinians, the government in Tehran, and various others. And the interference there has been significant. And they've cast this basically the government cracked down on so-called peaceful protesters. First of all, the protests aren't peaceful. They get direct aid from other governmental countries, literally, to format this. And then there's an organization called the Free Syrian Army. That's basically an organization put together by enemies of the Damascus government. So this situation goes round and round. The Security Council hasn't agreed because of opposition from Russia and China. Beijing on Wednesday defended the Arab League's widely criticized observer mission. Well, there is an observer mission there, and the Chinese have called on all parties in Syria to cooperate with the Arab League in its mediation settlement. And there can be a settlement worked out there. And also, as you heard, the Russian foreign minister said they would block any attempt by the West to secure the United Nations support of use of force against Syria. These have been used. You saw what happened in Libya to overthrow a legitimate government and then cast a bunch of bandits as a loyal opposition when in fact it was all fabricated. The history book has not been written fully on the Libyan revolution, nor has the outcome. They're still fighting there. The government is weak. They've installed a bunch of patsies there in Libya. How long this will go on, we honestly do not know at this point in time. The Israelis made an airstrike on Gaza. 2 Palestinians were killed in the raid. This is in northern Gaza, according to the health ministry there. So the fighting goes on there. In Myanmar, the government there is going to hold elections in April. The Nobel laureate Sir Kim will be in her party. Actually, will be in the elections. Ann Kim will be in the elections there. She's 66 years old. She has been in jail now and has been on house arrest over 20 years. They won the election in 1990. Military government came in. Now there's a civilian government there. They tried to put them also to the economic embargo. They survived. These economic embargoes and economic interference, as we said earlier, that was used on the WikiLeaks. You cut off the supply of money, you cut off the organization. Now they're trying to use a more international version of it called Sopa in the Internet Privacy Act. What this would do would be literally allow the movie moguls and various other characters operating on the obsolete copyright laws in the U.S. to ban whole sites and virtual sites from entering U.S. Internet space, we'll call it. And also the PayPals and those from dealing with them. There's still the PayPal in the U.S., but also what is happening, too, in China and other countries, you will see more PayPals, and you've seen more. Now we have other search engines. And this could impede Google, because eventually what is happening is 3/4 of the world's Internet traffic is now outside of North America, and more to come as people get online. So it could have a devastating effect on the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, because they have rivals out there would duplicate them. And eventually they, too, would make it to North America. This is Boston Red. Also, stay tuned for our Boston Red show, which is domestic informed. It deals with domestic politics. Tonight we have open mic. And on Friday Java, and of course on the weekend, the week that was. And Sunday politics, we have some special programs. The idea behind open mic is a more democratic thing, not a shouting match, but a discussion of current political developments. We also have a technology program, the Open Source Report. We were there the other night. You can find that on Blog Talk on the Open Source Report. This is Boston Red. Be careful. Talk to you soon. Sinuses permitting.